Forests are not just about trees, but they are also about people. They are about people working together towards an equitable and sustainable management of forest resources. This has been the motivating factor that has propelled the Growing Forest Partnerships (GFP) initiative for the past 3 years. The GFP has developed and supported networks of people and organizations at local, national and international levels towards sustainable management of forestry resources. It has brought together actors who may not have worked together before to ensure that global discussions about forest include the real and current challenges that forest-dependent people and local forest managers are facing, and to develop and test new and innovative ways of tackling those challenges.
Forest country no government and as a country be a forest a dear country no forest susu home abuya neme bebre ye onuani bi bebre wo ho a forest mu na obenya fi a bit say nwa embreni ade je forest mu edu area bi wo ho a wori nya sane ya ne nyina sa ho ne nyina je onya fi forest mu nti no forest no ne ati ni say country na mu no so no obeyi su nua obesi dan obeyi bibia no nua ka ho nti government no ne betima ya say nka ye nyina ababua yen a no nkyere kwan bi nti anka mo na forest no ogusu bu hunu ade ye adwuma o country no mu no na ongama ba bia omugusu dua nua akwan o mfa se o madua nua muje dua musu dua 3 years 4 years 5 years time no abetima ma wo nso wa dua nua ba ma profit na abua government no so.
It is estimated that between 12 and 14 million people in this country depend on forest resources for their livelihood. These include their daily food requirement, employment and income, as well as their health needs.
And so this brings a social dimension to the issues of forest management. That is why participation of forest communities in decision-making about what the forest is used for and what the benefits from the forest, how they are shared, is very important. So in terms of sustainable forest management, which IUCN as an organization and which GFP has been supporting over the years, the aspect of community participation in decision-making has been one area that we've been working very closely with government and with other partners to foster and to strengthen.
I'm a farmer, a landowner, community elder and leader at Pepase in the Wasa Menfi West District near Asankragwa. I got to know the Green Forest Partnership as a national level platform that was looking at the natural resources, particularly forests, and the institutions involved and what they are doing and the gaps in between. We have been able to even conduct desk study into the various investments that have come to the forestry sector that is supposed to impinge on the work of communities for us to know the gaps.
Even though forest is used by both men and women, the value they place on the forest differ.
We've come to realize that the benefits or the uses of the forest also differ with men and women. Women, normally what women get from the forest is products that are part of the household consumption, like snail, fuel wood. You know, usually women bring these back into the household, so it becomes more of a common good for the household to enjoy. Men, on the other hand, mostly sell or convert these products into cash.
So, the forests are not just about trees, but about people. This is in spite of the fact that in the past century, the forest cover of the country has reduced from 8.2 million hectares to 1.6 million hectares. This translated to an annual deforestation rate of 65,000 hectares. The depletion of the country's forest cover could be attributed to bad farming practices, bushfires, mining activities, especially surface mining and illegal mining, particularly known as galamsey, and illegal logging, particularly chainsaw activities. While legislation abounds, enforcement is thwarted by lack of political will. What is the result of this trend? Raphael Yeboah is the Executive Director, Forestry Services Division of the Ghana Forestry Commission.
When it comes to enforcement of the forest laws, it has been extremely difficult. We still have on our statute books some laws that are as old as 1957. Very, very old laws, some of them which are obsolete in terms of its punitive intentions. Like, for instance, if somebody can harvest a tree and go away with a fine of about 1 million, then it becomes even a motivation to undertake illegal harvesting of trees. And the same goes to farming, and the same goes to mining. So our laws have been overtaken by events and need to be reformed. And this is currently what is being done, to be trying to reform a lot of our laws. But having said all this, you can see that the center of all the distraction is man. So that if, in terms of forest governance, we don't have a platform that brings the private sector, that brings the civil society, that brings government to a talking point to be able to resolve the issues, then we cannot make any progress. And that is where the growing forest partnership is a necessary intervention.
The growing forest partnership has been a very good project when it comes to the industry, because it has been participatory, where most of the industry players were actually involved in fashioning out some of the problems in the forest fringe areas.
The forests cover hills in the ecological balance of a nation and give rise to sound environmental protection. Because of this, governments and related agencies put in measures to ensure a sound environmental climate.
The forests play a major role in the balances in exchange of gases. And if that doesn't happen, then there will be imbalance. And so when you talk about ecological balance, we anticipate that the forest will play its role that it's supposed to play to make sure that life is comfortable for all of us, including animals on this planet.
Agriculture, mining and forestry sectors, which are heavily dependent on land resources, constitute about 70% of Ghana's gross domestic product, GDP.
The contribution of the forestry sector is not properly captured. There are many other goods and services of the forestry sector generated in the forestry sector which are not captured in the national accounting system in computing the country's gross domestic product. An example is the bushmeat. Bushmeat alone, by our assessment, we found that it's worth as much as $275 million. It's a big industry, but it is not captured in our national accounting. If you look at the contribution of illegal chainsaw to the timber industry, as much as 80% of the timber that you find on the domestic market comes from illegal chainsaw operations. Now that is more than 50 million Ghana cedis, but this is not captured because it's labeled as illegal. It is not captured in our national accounting system. We have done studies of the use of non-forest products, non-timber forest products, and the industry contributes as much as 146 Ghana cedis. That is what that industry is worth, but it is not captured, appropriately captured in our national accounting system.
The forest sector used to contribute significantly to the domestic product of the nation, especially by way of foreign exchange earnings, because when we started extracting mahoganies in the 1880s and in the late 1900s, the forestry sector was contributing well, apart from cocoa and gold. But now, I think the forestry sector is about the fifth or fourth export earner, because tourism has now overtaken forestry. And so it tells us that with time, our contribution to GDP is decreasing. And so we should be able to come out with innovative ways that will bring forestry back on track, because the forest sector has an enormous potential. And with the emerging issues on the carbon trade from this red, there is a whole lot we can do to improve upon the earnings of the forestry sector.
Despite the forestry sector contribution to the national economy, there continued to be a downward trend of the country's forest cover that has been left unchecked for years.
Ghana's forest policy, we had as early as 1948 a policy. This policy was again revised in 1994, and currently it is under revision. Supporting this policy is also a number of parent and secondary laws, by that I mean acts and legislative instruments. Some of the policies have been to actually all have the objective of sustainably managing the forest. However, when it comes to enforcement of the forest laws, it has been extremely difficult.
One of the key issues that have come up for the past few years in terms of challenges in the way the forest sector is managed has to do with governance, and governance in terms of decision making, who has the mandate to make decisions about how resources are used, how revenues accruing from those resources are used, and who benefits from it and all that. That has been in the past skewed towards government and the industry, relegating communities to the background, and that has caused a lot of the challenges that we have in terms of the rapid rate of deforestation, encroachment by communities, and all of the challenges that we find in the sector. Because as long as people are not part of the decision-making process, are not part of benefits that come from those resources, then they would find their own means of trying to resolve or make ends meet, and that is some of the things that we've been seeing as a key challenge.
These and other factors prompted the International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN, the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, and International Institute for Environmental and Development, IIED, to initiate the Growing Forest Partnerships, GFP, as a platform for sustainable forest management. The focus of the Growing Forest Partnership Initiative is to bring about a better understanding of forest governance and foster participation from the community level, private sector involvement, and governmental action.
FAO, as you know, is implanted. It has offices in each and every country, member countries of the organizations, and therefore, when GFP, selected Ghana as a country to pilot the GFP initiative, FAO, being in Ghana and work in the forestry sector, was really a natural partner. And so, you see, FAO has, in the past, produced a very solid background or platforms that GFP can just utilize to build upon rather than starting over again.
So our 1994 policy called for collaboration of people and forests. So what we've been doing is to try as much as possible to build linkages and platforms. Fortunately, the Green Forest Partnership is one of the platforms that we're currently using, because they are not coming for projects like normally some other development partners come, but to see how we can put systems together in the form of platforms, seeing how forest management could be done with local communities and how other people can also contribute, but not only government. But they come in with governance issues to see how forests can be managed properly.
This approach has been acknowledged by the International Monetary Fund (IMF) as one way of ensuring that forestry sector contributes to economic growth and enhance the livelihood of forest-dependent communities, reduce poverty amongst them, as well as preserve the global services that forests deliver.
The initiative has given us a very good impact now, because before our collaborative platforms were not existing, so the GFP has helped us build such platforms, as well as also giving us some catalytic projects which are being piloted all over the country. And from these and the platforms of governance and other issues, we are able to integrate the decisions that we need to take into policies.
I think Growing Forest Partnerships comes in as a very useful program in terms of looking at what the gaps are, where we've moved from, what are the gaps, and where can they provide support in terms of technical funding and other support to help us to get to that level where we have a reformed forestry sector that responds to the needs of community. So I think it comes in handy in terms of all the interventions or activities that will help us to get to where we want to get to in terms of the reform process in the sector.
Richard Jima, Acting Manager, Verification and Field Audit of the Forestry Commission, undertook a research work on the depletion of the country's forest cover and the need to sustain it.
Basically, I worked on mapping of key forest governance reforms in Ghana and the role of the Growing Forest Partnership.
What are some of the findings and recommendations of the studies?
We can look at first the process of identifying the problems that is confronting the entire society together. Instead of the government agency doing it alone, they can start identifying the problems with the entire community, both the government, the civil society, the private sector, so that there's a common understanding where we want to go. So once there's a common understanding amongst all the actors, then it becomes easier for you to implement whatever programs or projects you have. So the Growing Forest Partnership can start by identifying problems or challenges that are facing communities as far as forest management is concerned, and so that when everybody buys in and accept that this is the challenge they want to overcome, then it makes implementation quite easier.
In the beginning of the Growing Forest Partnership intervention in Ghana, there were a lot of consultative meetings with civil society, with government, with industry, trying to look at what is already there in the system, what are the shortfalls, and where can GFP or Growing Forest Partnership bring impact or help. So in terms of the solutions they were putting on the table, I think it's useful. There were a number of publications or studies that were conducted that I think it's useful in terms of providing information and reflection of where we've got into, and therefore helping policymakers, civil society and the industry to rethink and to move in a certain direction. And to the point about why not exploit the resources, and you need to do that on a sustainable basis. You need to involve the communities in that process. And I think that Growing Forest Partnerships has been able to help in terms of providing that kind of platform where people can engage, people can have discussion, as I mentioned, and look at what policies, legal framework or policy or institutional frameworks need to be in place to help us to sustainably manage our forest resources.
There is no doubt that the findings from these studies can challenge and influence assistance, direction, and quality of development, as well as the development of the forest resources.
Any intervention that seeks to bring together private sector, the civil society, and government to a table to resolve the governance issues, the gap relating to forest management is necessary. And for that matter, I would say that the Growing Forest Partnership will augment whatever we are doing in terms of management towards the achievement of the anticipated goal of sustainable forest management within the country.
Initially, government didn't have collaborative schemes, but now the government is trying to bring collaborative schemes. And what I mean by collaboration is the fact that the government now thinks that they can't do it alone, so it's doing all the forest management with local communities, traditional authorities, private sector, civil society, and this is the sort of platforms that GFP is trying to help us build. And when you do that, then you have an all-inclusive management system, and everybody knows what is happening. There's transparency, there's benefit sharing for everybody who contributes to the process.
The IUCN, through its partnership with the FAO and IIED, have contributed a lot for bringing the Growing Forest Partnership into fruition, an initiative that has paved the way for the sustenance of the country's forest cover.
All forest stakeholders in Ghana should participate in the effort to reach sustainable forest management in the country. They should not overlook the role that they can play. That's very important. The government has made an effort to associate them in the sustainable forest management of the country, of the resources. And I think they should, together with NGOs, local government, local communities, voice out their need and see how these needs in terms of capacity building can be enhanced through the different partners like FAO, IUCN, and so forth in the country.
We have created awareness about the key issues, the problems that need to be addressed in the forestry sector. Now that we have developed policy briefs, there are actionable steps that government can take to address these issues.
Moving ahead, I see one, capacity building in terms of implementation of sector policies for communities and monitoring for communities. I also see the legal reforms or concluding the reform processes, as I've mentioned. Those are the key areas that I think that moving ahead, GFP or Growing Forest Partnerships need to be looking at, so that together we can help to build capacity, reform the sector, and be able to put in place all the instruments to enforce all the policies and laws that we have in the sector to ensure that we're able to manage sustainably our forest resources and help to contribute to alleviating poverty of communities that live around these forest resources.
The forest has always have had impact on the private sector as well as the communities and the government. I think what needs to be done now is to institute and enforce proper governance, which has been the recommendation from the GFP project. We need to enforce these recommendations. That is good governance. We need to make sure that benefit sharing, which has always been the problem between government, the community, and the rippling effect to the industry. We need to address this problem and make sure that a proper and well-established benefit sharing scheme is projected for this industry. And I think that with the institution of this recommendation, we would have a better forest, and our children to come will also enjoy what we are enjoying now.
The GFP expects the continuation of these partnership platforms in ways that will further establish the collaboration among the private sector, civil society, and the government to ensure a sustainable forest space. After all, when the last tree dies, the last man dies. We need the forest for our sustenance.